Veteran on the Move, number 34.
Welcome to Veteran on the Move. If you're a veteran in transition, an entrepreneur wannabe, or someone still stuck in that JOB trying to escape, this podcast is dedicated to your success. And now, your host, Joe Crane.
ZacBob is an Air Force veteran who started the podcast CrowdFund Genius, where you can get expert crowdfunding advice from genius crowdfunders. ZacBob, welcome to the show. Appreciate you being here today. And also, welcome back to the States. You just got back after being over in Kuwait for about 5 years. So if you start off a little bit by telling us what you did in the Air Force.
Thank you, Joe. And I want to say thank you for having me on the show as well. It's truly an honor. I was in the military. I joined in September 10th, 2002. My actual first day at basic training was 1 year after 9/11. And I served for about 6 years, 9 months. I extended my service date in order to go overseas and serve a tour in to serve a tour in Korea. So I joined and I was a 1 Charlie 3 or a command post controller. We did a lot of flight following for aircraft at different stations or the aircraft that were stationed at our location. I went from Lackland Air Force Base basic training to Keesler Air Force Base for tech school. I did about 6 months at Keesler. And the odd thing was when I was at Keesler, I don't know if you knew about this, Joe, but whenever we're at school, every once in a while, a guard will come in and they'll bump you out of your spot. So I was at school and I was at the base for about a month and a half before I actually got to start class because I kept getting pushed back a couple weeks here, waiting to start school.
Yeah, I didn't realize that happened. It kind of sounds like back to the days of going to flight school. Sometimes you'd have to sit in pools for weeks or several months waiting to start the next phase of training. But I'm sure you found something to do during that time, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, they found something for me to do, cleaning toilets, cleaning the barracks and things like that.
Come on, Air Force guys clean toilets? There's no way.
Yeah, every once in a while we have to, but that was they had that for the guys that got in trouble mainly, but we kind of supervised that, I guess.
All right.
So I went to school. We were at school for about 6 months. I graduated just in time for Christmas vacation, I guess you could call it, and got to go home, see the family, and do the whole recruiter assistance program. And we did that for about 2 weeks, and then I went off to my first duty station, which was Scott Air Force Base. It's right over around St. Louis area.
Yeah.
And that's also Air Mobility headquarters. And I didn't really know what I was in for. It was my first term, my first base. And, I was an airman I think I was A1C. I came out as an E3 because I signed up for 6 years instead of 4. And, Air Mobility headquarters is probably one of the most busiest bases in the world. There's really not a lot at Scott Air Force Base except for AMC. And, I worked at a place called TACC, the Tanker Airlift Control Center, and they handled all the flights in the world. And this was right before, Iraqi freedom kicked off and Enduring Freedom had just started. So it wasn't too busy, but it was just busy enough to make it go. But once Iraqi freedom kicked off, it just went nuts up there. I think I worked 12, 14-hour days for at least 4 days in a row. Then we'd get maybe 36 hours off, then we'd just start all over again. And we continued on like that for quite a while. And I remember I hadn't seen any of my friends and they came back and saw me and I was all skinny, lost a lot of weight. But we did that. We handled a lot of missions, like any type of humanitarian efforts, like Katrina. When Katrina happened, we built all these missions to fly in and out of there. For the Indonesia, the tsunami that took place, we were doing the same thing there. So if you deployed or anything like that from, I was there till 2007, I believe. So 2002 to 2007. Yeah, 2002 to 2007. If you deployed any time during that time frame, I was probably the one that built the mission that you flew over on or you flew back on.
Okay, well, thanks twice to you then. Now, how did your time in the military end up? And more importantly, what was your transition like heading out into the civilian world?
Well, after I was stationed in Korea, I had to do 1 more year in the States, and I ended up at Vandenberg Air Force Base, which was like Space Command, and it was a tad bit boring. And I decided that year that I was going to get out. And it was scary at the time, because that's all I knew was the military. This is what I did. You woke up. This is what you wore. This is what everything was just set out for you, and you already knew what to do. So getting out was kind of a eye opener and a bit, it was a bit scary. And at the time, we had a re-enlistment bonus, so that was lingering in my mind too. Like, I mean, it was like $30,000. So I was sitting there like, if I stay in, I can get this re-enlistment bonus. And my command had offered to send me to Al-Udeid if I would stay in to re-enlist, so it'd be tax free.
Yeah, dangling the carrot out there, huh?
Yeah, but I decided to pass, and I got out. And I remember sitting there. We have TAPS class, a class that you go to for about 2 weeks that kind of helps you transition out of the military, and you take it while you're still in the military, so there's still time to back out. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was in the class, I think Obama was talking about the Iraq pullout at the time, and my whole goal was to get out, and I was just going to take a contracting position and go to Al-Udeid anyways. And I was sitting there watching that. The economy was going to crap. It was 2008, and it was a tough decision to get out, but I did it. I made it, and when I was sitting in TAPS class, I also remembered I had a thrift savings plan. So I'd been investing like 10% of my paycheck in that.
All right. Well, good for you.
Yeah. So like financially, I was okay. I did all right getting out financially. Uh-huh. I had some time. I mean, you also get unemployment when you get out if you need that. And then I think I was out for about 6 months. I went on a 2-month vacation as soon as I got out. And then I think I was out for about 6 months, and I ended up taking a contracting position in Kuwait. It was making good money. It wasn't like 6 figures or anything like that, but it was making pretty decent money. And I ended up in Kuwait for 5 years after that. The whole time, wanting to be an entrepreneur. It's just, it kind of came into my mind while I was in Kuwait about being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Had you thought about or gotten involved in any type of entrepreneurial pursuits before that, or you got over there and that's when the entrepreneurial bug hit you?
Well, when I was in high school and things like that, I grew up and I kind of think I was an entrepreneur, but I didn't even really understand what an entrepreneur was. To me, it was just trying to earn money. I was just trying to, right. I started a lawn mowing business one time with a friend, and I remember he ended up bailing on me, and I had like this, we had handed out all these flyers, and I was getting all these calls, like way too many for me to handle. But, so I think it was always there. But then once, it was always, for me, it was always just graduate high school, then go get a job. And, my job ended up being the military. So then I got stuck in that mindset. And then when I got out, I was like, well, let me just hurry up and try to get over in this contracting before it all ends. And then when I was in Kuwait is when it came back around to me again.
Now, did you ever discuss entrepreneurial type stuff with any of your fellow servicemen while you're in the service?
No.
Yeah, to be honest, I rarely did. The reason I ask is I rarely did also. And I was really wanting to do something in that realm, and I almost felt like alone. Those entrepreneur wannabes in the military, they're out there, but you really have no way of finding them without exposing yourself.
Yeah.
So I was just curious if maybe you had met anybody, but I really think that's kind of what you might call it, a common issue with that entrepreneur wannabe that's in the military. Is it's not, it's almost looked down upon to be thinking like that, because you're trying to be a team player and it's all about the mission. If you're thinking of something outside the military mission, then you must be, self-centered, that kind of thing. So I almost felt guilty sometimes working on or thinking about my entrepreneurial desires.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So I always called it like, I'm not trying to say anything bad about the military, but I always thought it was kind of like a creativity killer. Whenever you was in the military, you don't really get too creative because everything's kind of uniformed and laid out for you, like I said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's by design. So certainly no criticism whatsoever towards the military or military members, because we got the best military in the world and they do a phenomenal job. But if you've got that entrepreneurial itch, sometimes it's real hard to scratch it while you're still in. So and if you are scratching it, you got to kind of keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
So anyways, you're in Kuwait, and how was it your entrepreneurial ventures started up?
Well, when I went over to Kuwait, I was thinking real estate. I was going to buy a bunch of small homes and then, fix them up and then start renting them out. That's originally what I was thinking when I first went to Kuwait, and I was going to earn this contracting money. And then sometime within that first year, I just started thinking bigger. And I thought there's got to be a better way because, I'm in Kuwait. It's hot. It's not very fun there. And working 14-hour days. And I was like, there's just got to be a better way. And I just kept thinking and thinking. And then, I think a combination of things happened all in like one trip. I went on a vacation. I think it was about a month and a half. Because when you're in contracting, you have to take a month and a half vacation because you never get one. So after like 6 months, you take a vacation. And I ended up taking one after 1 year, and it was about a month and a half. And on that vacation, I think two things happened to me that kind of made me realize that, if they could do it, then why can't I? And I read the Steve Jobs autobiography. I think it's by Walter Isaacson. Have you ever read it?
No, I haven't. I have to put that on my list.
Yeah, I read that book while, on the plane and everything like that. And I actually picked it up, I think, at like a duty free or at the airport. And I remember reading it on the plane, and it was very well written. And, I knew the story of Steve Jobs, but I didn't really, really know it. And then after reading that book, I just kind of opened my eyes a little bit. And then after that, I think when I was on vacation, I also saw that the Social Network too. And I was like, look at these guys. They're just out there killing it, So I was like, I need to do something. And, I tried a couple bigger projects besides what I'm doing now. And both of them, I ended up splurging a lot of money and not getting anywhere. So I thought, you know what, let me just try something I'm a little more comfortable with, which was podcasting.
And had you been listening to a lot of podcasts at that point?
And after that trip, actually, I did. I started Googling everything I could find, started looking up all the information I could find on the internet, and it led me to these podcasts. And I believe the first one I ever heard was John Lee Dumas, Entrepreneurial on Fire. I think you're familiar with it.
Oh, yeah.
And he got me hooked. And then I think I jumped in on him on like episode 15 or 19 or something like that. So I've been listening to him forever. And all the way up into the launch of my podcast, I think I'd heard just about almost every single episode because I'd listen to it at the gym, and on the way to work and on the way home from work and things like that.
So you're looking to do podcasting, but like the big question is, what are you going to do your podcast on? How did you come up with that?
Okay. All right. So John Lee Dumas did something called, I think it was the Great Business Experiment.
Yeah.
And it was kind of on crowdfunding. And it was around, I believe, his first year that he launched Entrepreneur on Fire. He did that show. And I remember listening to it. And then afterwards, I was kind of like, man, he killed it. He never went back. And but at the time, I was already in another entrepreneur business. So I couldn't just abandon everything I was doing just to focus on doing a podcast. But, I was really into Kickstarter. I was really into crowdfunding already. And I was thinking after all these years, I was like, how come nobody's done a crowdfunding podcast? And it was always in the back of my mind. And I think that was probably like 2 years ago. And then finally, that business that I was involved with and just kind of wrapped it up. So then I decided to jump into podcasting and decided to go with crowdfunding. Started interviewing people, started interviewing successful campaigns. And then I started recording successful campaigns. And I threw up a Facebook page and a Twitter account and reserved the name CrowdFund Genius last August 2013. And then just by doing that and sharing information about crowdfunding and things like that, it led me to people, coming to me, asking me questions. And I started giving out advice right and left. But then when it started I'm getting emails every single day and things like that, I decided to start charging, why not?
Yeah.
And now I do consulting work as well, but mainly I'm really focused on my podcast. It's absolutely free. And, you can get it on iTunes or Stitcher.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. And I love the name too, because the name says exactly what you want people to know about it. You're the genius when it comes to crowdfunding. Or if you're not necessarily the genius, if you listen to the podcast, you're listening to the geniuses of the whole crowdfunding industry.
Exactly. And that's how I like to put it too. When people ask me like, oh, so you're a crowdfunding genius. And I'm like, no, just the people I interview. They're the geniuses. They're the ones that are hitting it big on Kickstarter and Indiegogo.
And that's also interesting. One of the things about podcasting that seems to be a common theme, whether you start a podcast or start some other type of online venture, particularly, you're not really sure how you're going to monetize it, but then your audience eventually lets you know. And that's kind of what happened to you. You start getting all sorts of emails and phone calls and you're giving away all sorts of free advice. And all of a sudden, hey, you know what? Maybe I should charge for this since I'm spending most of my time, helping people out. And
exactly.
And now it's working for you.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much how it went too. I mean, and like I was just hadn't even launched the podcast yet, and the questions started coming in and it started getting in the way of me actually launching the podcast.
Man, that's great. There's obviously a big need for that out there, and you picked a really good niche.
Thank you.
Did you have a problem in the beginning when you were trying to figure out what you do your podcast on? Did you have a problem trying to niche down, or once you came up with that idea, it was probably go from the start? But did you have any problems with trying to niche down or wanting to stay more broad?
Not at all. I mean, I knew from like the day one, like when I first started listening, and I first thought the first idea for a podcast that popped into my mind was like do one on crowdfunding, because Kickstarter was fairly new at the time, and I mean that was like years ago. That was 2 or 3 years ago, and the moment that I always wanted to do it because it just looks fun, and the moment that that last business that I was in wrapped up, I was like, literally the next day, I think I started reserving domain names and launching Facebook accounts and Twitter accounts.
What day did you launch your podcast on?
August 1st this year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it was a whole year in the making.
Yeah. And I think you're up to around 30 episodes now that have been released.
Oh, no, I have about 30 recorded. I'm at 13 that's released.
Okay.
14 should be coming out later today.
All right, great. Now that you're this far along, I always like to ask folks if they're willing to reveal numbers. I mean, you don't have to reveal dollars or anything, but like, for example, you've actually been able to charge people to help them out with their crowdfunding questions, correct?
Yeah.
And so you've actually had people pay for that.
Yes.
Wow. So, what a great opportunity for you. And just recently, you're back here in the U.S. after being in Kuwait for 5 years, and you've left your lucrative contracting job, and now you've jumped in full with both feet, right? With your podcast. So you're all in now.
All in.
How does that feel?
It feels great. I mean, previous job, I was there for 5 years, like you said, working 12 to 14-hour days, and you dread it. After a while, you're just like, oh man, I got to go back. But I was fortunate enough that at my lucrative contracting job, I was allowed to bring my laptop to work, and I had internet connection. So like during my downtime, I could always just work on my side business while I'm at work. Some of my other coworkers, they're watching movies or doing things like that, but I'm always over there in the corner just working on the side business, which is now my full-time business.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now that you've jumped in, I know it's been really recent for you, but now that you've jumped in full time, I mean, can you compare, looking back on it, what it's like having that job versus running your own show and truly being an entrepreneur?
I mean, now I wake up early. I still work long, hard days from start to finish, but it goes by a lot quicker. I kind of feel like I have a more control on my life now. The harder I work, the more money it will produce. If I slack off, there's no one else to blame but myself. And you and I are both veterans, and I think we kind of have an advantage here because every one of us has been put out there and put to the test in the military and come out on the other side. So we all know how to do hard work and put in them long hours continuously. But now when I do it, it's just fun.
That's great. I love that answer. And I think you said something about you're hinting that you actually enjoy getting up early in the morning a lot more than you used to.
Oh, well, I mean, I've always been an early bird type of guy, but now when I get up, I enjoy it a lot more because I know exactly what I'm going to. I know exactly what I want to do and what I want to accomplish for the day.
Yeah. And I've experienced the same thing. And it seems like such a small little point, but when you wake up or when you wake up before the alarm goes off because you're ready to go, to me, that's the biggest difference between being an entrepreneur and having a job. Usually sometimes when you got that job, you're hitting the snooze button a couple times.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And sometimes, like you said, you'll wake up before the alarm clock. And the first thing I go for is my laptop. First thing I'm doing is checking numbers and email.
So now that you've made this transition into the exciting world of entrepreneurship, I know there's a veteran out there listening, whether he's still active duty or just got out or about to get out, thinking about doing their own entrepreneurial venture. What kind of advice would you have for them, somebody that's thinking about making that plunge?
I mean, I'd say go for it. I mean, you're doing it. I'm doing it. like I said earlier, I think we have an advantage as veterans. I mean, everybody that's been in the military, I think we kind of got an unfair advantage. We know what it's like to work. So just get out there, expect to fail a few times. I mean, especially if you're about to get out, they have the Boots to Business program. I don't know if you know about that, Joe. Have you heard of this?
I do. We've talked about it a few times on the show, and talk specifically about that one. And there's a host of other ones also. Yeah,
and I would strongly recommend it. And then once you get done with that, once you get out, start looking for a mentor.
Well, what is the Boots to Business program exactly, specifically, if somebody's interested in checking that out?
Well, I didn't get to use it whenever I got out. Mm-hmm. They didn't have it around, but from what I understand, it's a program that you go through. It's kind of like a entrepreneurship boot camp. I think they teach you how to write a business plan. And they bring in, I believe, different businesses to kind of tell you what to do, what you need to do to run a business. And I think they teach you about, what are they called? Like incorporations versus LLC and things like that.
Yeah, and a number of things you've mentioned, a number of things you've touched on, including the Boots to Business, is I actually have a free giveaway on the website, veteranonthemove.com. It's called the 7 Pathfinders to Freedom. And it's a lot of the things that I discovered along the way in my transition into entrepreneurship that a lot of veterans may not know about. And so if you go to the website and enter your email address there, I'll send it to you. It's free. And it just touches on some of these things that are out there, some of these great programs. If you really want to go be an entrepreneur, there's a lot of people that want to see you succeed. And that's the best thing about being a veteran and wanting to become an entrepreneur is there's so much help out there. The key is you got to go looking for it and you got to go ask for help and you got to be willing to go get involved in some of these programs. If you're starting from scratch, I would recommend sucking up as many of these programs and getting involved in as many of these other things as you can. And the best news about for being a veteran is most of them are for free. Other people can go to these programs, but veterans get to go to them for free. And if you're a member of the veteran community, like a spouse, especially spouses living overseas with their military spouse, a lot of spouses can go to these programs for free too. And then, of course, today a lot of them are being conducted online, so you don't have to be present to go through some of these courses. So, and Boots to Business is just one of them. It's a great one, but it's just one of them. So there's plenty of great resources and programs out there. And you said veterans that almost have an unfair advantage in the world of entrepreneurship. There are some statistics out there, like veterans have a 30 or 35% greater chance of succeeding in an entrepreneurial venture than your non-veteran does.
Yeah, see? Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You're exactly right.
Advantage.
Yep, the statistics show. And some of that just has to do with you've learned, how to get up early in the morning, you know how to show up to work, and you know how to work while you're there, and you know how to be a team player, and you know how to make things happen and get things done. And exactly. And a lot of us veterans take a lot of that for granted because when you're in the middle of it and you've done it for many years, you just it's an assumption from the people that are around you, and you get kind of numb to it. And then you get out in the civilian world and you realize a lot of businesses don't operate that way. And a lot of civilians don't think like that or operate that way also. I mean, there's a lot of great ones out there, of course, but you do kind of take for granted the kind of people and the kind of work ethic you're surrounded by when you're in the military.
Yep.
Well, put in a little plug for your podcast and your website and everything. So if anybody wants to get a hold of you, discuss crowdfunding or just listen to your podcast.
All right. Well, you can check me out at crowdfundgenius.com, or you can find me on Twitter and Facebook under CrowdFund Genius. And if you can't find me there, you can just email me at ZacBob@crowdfundgenius.com. And you can schedule a free 15-minute consultation if you have a crowdfunding idea on my website. Otherwise, just enjoy my free podcast, CrowdFund Genius, on iTunes and Stitcher.
ZacBob, that's great. I know I actually called you initially to discuss a crowdfunding project that I was looking at working on, and you're a lot of help and sent me off to some other guys that I've already talked to. So great information. You're a great resource if anybody's looking to jump into that crowdfunding realm. Now, before I give you the last word, I want to ask you one more question. And maybe it's a little unfair because you haven't been doing it that long. But I always like to ask, now that you're out there in the world of entrepreneurship and you've become an entrepreneur, would you consider yourself unemployable?
Yeah,
The context of what I'm meaning is, now that you've escaped from the job, could you ever see yourself going back?
I think I could. I could see myself going back to work someday down the road, but I don't know if I could ever work for someone again. I think maybe I could go back. It's like a partner maybe in a startup or something like that, smaller down the road. But I'm going to say, yeah, I think I'm unemployable now.
Well, I could see myself actually going to prison if I had to, and I could survive it and make it through. But it would be like going to prison.
Yeah.
It's not something I want to do. So, all right, ZacBob, it's been a great interview and full of great information. I appreciate you being here. And once again, welcome back to the great US of A. And I appreciate your service over those years and all you've done. I'd like to give you the last word. And if you had any parting words of wisdom for our veterans out there that are looking to delve into the world of entrepreneurship.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Joe. And thank you for everything you're doing with Veteran on the Move. It really helps out. I've been listening to a couple episodes and it's really great information for anybody that's listening. Listen to some of the back episodes as well. And as far as getting out there and being an entrepreneur, just go for it, man. It's wonderful. Once you start getting into it, it becomes your passion. It consumes you, and that's all you want to do.
All right, ZacBob, great advice, and appreciate you being here again. So we will talk to you soon, and good luck with the podcast. Look forward to seeing your success.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you for listening to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are always greatly appreciated. So until next time, this veteran is Oscar Mike.